Hello, everyone, and thanks for making the time today. Really appreciate you jumping in here to learn a little bit more about the capabilities that we offer as an organization and a platform. My name is Nadav Gordon. I'm responsible for strategic accounts here at HeadSpin, and I'm joined by David Broker, one of our senior sales engineers. So today we'll be talking about how your organization can use our AV Box solution to test your applications across a wide variety of use cases. And here's a look at the topics that we're going to be covering today. So I'll spend a few minutes giving you an overview of HeadSpin as a company and a platform, and then I'll turn it over to David and he'll give you an overview of the AV Box solution in specificity across use cases, and then show you a live demo of how that solution works. And finally, we'll conclude with Q&A. So if you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to click the Q&A button in the control panel, submit your questions there, and we'll get to them one by one at the end of this session. So I'm going to go off camera now to conserve some bandwidth, and let's get started. So who is HeadSpin and what do we offer? So HeadSpin is a 7-year-old company based in Sunnyvale, California, and we were founded on the premise of helping our customers execute synthetic testing on real-world digital experiences. So as you may be aware, speed, ease of use, and ensuring the experience is consistent are critically important to the success of every enterprise. And that's where HeadSpin's platform really comes into play. So we recognize that delivering a great digital experience is an act of deep collaboration between the likes of product management, development, testing, and site reliability engineering teams. And our platform helps to drive that collaboration. So we're backed by the likes of Google Ventures and other notable firms. And in addition to Google also being one of our top customers, we've been blessed to be able to partner with some amazing brands such as Amazon, Pinterest, and a bevy of others whose digital experiences are undeniably tied to business results. And we service customers across industry verticals, and some of these customers are being served across multiple geographies with hundreds of devices under test. Our platform allows organizations to get a clear end-to-end view of the digital experiences that they offer. And the way we're able to do this is by using real devices and quality of experience analytics for mobile, web, audio, video, and other connected experiences like Internet of Things and even infotainment dashboards that you find in cars. And so as you can see here, our platform can be broken down into 4 pillars. The first on the left is our global device infrastructure, through which you'll be able to access hundreds of real devices to test and monitor your customer experiences end to end on actual carrier and Wi-Fi networks. And we currently have a presence in over 50 countries and 100 different locations. The second pillar is where you have test automation and support for essentially all test frameworks. We have native integrations with Appium and Selenium, allowing for seamless integration into your CI/CD workflows and enabling functional and performance testing for both pre as well as post-release. And our open APIs give you the ability to export data and insights to any BI and data visualization platforms, as well as monitoring dashboards. So from the perspective of integrating with test frameworks, you can consider us agnostic. We've done this across over 65 different frameworks to date. The third pillar is where you'll find performance and quality of experience measurement. Our platform allows you to identify bottlenecks and issues by surfacing the underlying root causes from all layers of your technology stack. So whether it be audio or video quality of experience that we'll talk about in a little bit, to the code and even packet visibility. Our platform gives you the ability to measure KPIs that you care about, whether they are extensive application, device, network, and even critical user journeys and screen transitions. We have 140 KPIs that come out of box. Sounds like there's a little bit of distortion. Sorry about that. We have 140 KPIs that come out of box in the platform, and we can customize additional KPIs that your organization cares about and wants to measure if you choose to do so. And then finally, we have insights to actions. So this is where HeadSpin really separates itself from other device farms where you typically only get a pass-fail grade on your tests. We're able to deliver deep regression and aggregation insights throughout the digital lifecycle. So over time, your organization can build your regression intelligence using real analysis and metadata from the sessions that you run on the devices that you choose to run them on. And the final piece on the next slide is how we deploy. So I mentioned earlier that we have infrastructure in 50 different countries and 100 different locations, and we offer several different models, including on-premise, cloud, which is either single or multi-tenant, hybrid options, or a create your own lab capability that I'll elaborate on in a moment. So if you're looking for an on-premise deployment and you want to host your own devices internally in your data centers, we have appliances called the P box and the AV box, which you can see here on the left-hand side. And so you can host up to 24 devices in a P box and 2 devices in an AV box. The AV box was specifically built for rich audio and media use cases, and it's isolated from sound and light and is the only apparatus of its kind in the market today. The cloud deployment is our most popular option. And in this model, you would essentially leverage HeadSpin infrastructure by picking a data center in any one of our 100 locations globally and deploy the devices of your choice. We also always offer a hybrid model where you can leverage a mixture of HeadSpin infrastructure as well as your own. And you have the ability to deploy a P box in a country where we don't currently have a data center, if you choose to do so through one of our partners. And lastly, as I mentioned, we offer a capability called Create Your Own Lab, where you can essentially plug in devices to your laptop and run tests remotely while leveraging the HeadSpin remote control that David will show you as part of the demo. And so that concludes the high-level overview of our platform. I'll now turn it over to David to walk you through our AV box solution and walk you through a demo thereafter. David, over to you.
Thanks, Nadav, for that overview of what we're being discussing today. So as he mentioned, we're going to get into more details about the HeadSpin AV box solution. I just want to go through some use cases. And before I do that, just to familiarize you more with the tool itself, you saw the video of the AV box beforehand where you could see the Roku TV being watched by a phone. And so I'll get into a little more of how that actually works and how you can use it as an end user of HeadSpin. But also to make a comment on this slide before we go too far into it, we can also see this different structure, and this structure is actually for recording on larger scale TVs. Some of our customers, the smaller screens, while they're great in small use cases for the AV box, they really want to see the actual results on those 65 or 55-inch TVs to validate that what they are producing is actually what's being displayed on the screen correctly. So this is just another sort of TV rack that we have as a solution as well, in which we'll put drapery around it to make it more light isolated to get the actual true user experience of that product. So the one aspect that Nadav was alluding to earlier is just running these devices and then collecting data. So every time you run a test on HeadSpin, you'll get what we call a performance session. It's sort of our version of a test artifact. And you can see the example of that in the middle of the screen. We have our KPIs that are tracked along with the entire video of the test and issue cards that we produce to describe how good the end user experience was for the end consumer. And some of the video and audio capabilities that we describe and track for you are such things as blurriness and blockiness of the screen, video frame rate, janky frames in Android use cases. And we also have a reference-free based MOS scoring that we developed as part of our team. And so with that, you don't need to compare your video source to any other stream. We'll actually give you a score that we've created through our machine learning model and tell you how good of a view that was for a typical end user. And lastly, we also have an audio match analysis in which you can provide a sample audio of what should be played, and then we can compare it to what was actually streamed and see what the prominence ratio of those two are and how good the match score actually that was resulted because of that. So here's what I want to go over today with you. It's the AV box use cases. So there's about 5 different use cases that I've seen and deployed to customers that I've worked with. I want to show you how to do manual testing and also an example of automation that I've ran as well. And then we'll have a few customer examples at the very end, that are a little more concrete than the first. So let's go into the use cases. So these are the use cases we'll be discussing. So the first is just general media testing, and then we'll look at check deposit and QR scanning, follow that up with DRM testing, smart devices like Google Mini or Alexa, Zebra devices that you typically see in retail stores and warehouses, and then how you can do audio and video injection using the AV box solution. So OTT device testing, so over the top frameworks like Apple TV or Android TV, these are natively supported in HeadSpin today out of the box. And what's really nice about these tools and the way that we interact with them is we give you this little mini remote at the bottom of the screen. And I'll show this in the demo, but what you can do is you can use that remote just like you would a phone at your or a TV at your house. You can click around the buttons and navigate the screens accordingly. And then you can see that we have this layout. And so on the left is the actual, what we call DUT or device under test. So that's the TV that you're actually running the test against. And then we have called a camera device or CD. And what that does is that sits in front of the television to capture the end user experience that may not be able to be streamed right off the television. And I'll show you an example of that with DRM content. Additionally, I mentioned that we natively support things like Apple TV and Android TV, but that's not a limitation that we have. We can also do other products like Roku, Tizens, and Xboxes. Those will be typically a little different setup. We won't be able to have that nice remote at the bottom, but we'll usually use a companion app on a third device. And so it'll be a 3-device tie instead of a 2-device tie. And that'll allow you to navigate manually. But then with Appium 2.0, we're able to use the Tizen driver and the Roku driver to allow you to run automation against these as well. And so then I mentioned DRM testing. So this is kind of what that would look like in an actual use case. So what I have here is Netflix streaming on a phone. And so the phone we can see on the left is the device under test, and it's a black screen because the DRM content protection is working. We're not able to actually take that from the HDMI port itself or the USB port. What we can see is on the right, since we have a camera sitting in front of it, we can still see that video appearing, and then we can run analysis on that video itself. Next, we have the check deposit or QR code scanning. And so what we have here is we have an Apple 11 that I'm using as a device to produce a QR code. And right now I'm just using a browser to produce this web code. I'll have an example of how you could do that without using a browser, and you could actually inject an image that you'd want to see, like in the case of a check. But for right now, we're just going to look at the QR code use case. And then on the device on the right, we open the camera app, or if you had an application that had produced the camera SDK, you would be able to use that and then scan the QR code as we see in this HeadSpin device, and then follow the link accordingly. The other use case we have is smart assistants. And so this is a little more nuanced in how you actually are able to control this device. So there's no good way to tap into that Alexa or that Echo and run commands directly on it. And most use cases of actual end customers aren't going to be doing anything like that. They're going to be talking to it. So what we do in this setup is we have a camera device pointed at the Alexa and Google Mini, so we can see the lights turn on when it starts talking back to you. And then we can use this button right here that has a microphone on it, and we can produce audio from our browser into this AV box through the web. And then that'll allow us to interact with this Alexa or this Google Mini. So I could ask it, "Hey Google, what's the weather?" And then I could listen on my end and hear it respond and read me the weather. The other thing is just this is more of a manual use case. However, we also, as I mentioned earlier, allow you to inject audio. And so what you can also do is produce a WAV file with a command and then send it through automation and then validate that test case. As I mentioned in the QR code section, we also have this video injection ability or image injection ability. So this is a little different than the other AV box use cases. In this case, we're not necessarily just watching one of the other devices. We're just using it occasionally to view it. And so we have is what we call an auxiliary device, an AD, and that'll be the device on the right. And what that does is it'll allow us to inject this video stream. So this is actually a video stream that's being injected in the device on the right, and then I'm watching it on the device on the left. And the use cases for this could be, as I mentioned earlier, QR codes or check deposits, but also the other use case that we've used this for previously is for things like Zoom or Teams or things like that, where you want to have some sort of video that's being streamed over the web conferencing application to validate how good that user experience was for the end user of that product. Now we have Zebra devices, and these are a little more complex because you want to validate that the printer is actually printing the correct result and that it's functioning correctly. And so a lot of these printers, something that the customer would want to validate are the beeps that the printer has that it produces. And so you can still achieve that in the AV box. And additionally, you can validate through video that the printer is actually printing a label. And so what we can do is on the device on the left, this is the DUT, we can go ahead and produce some sort of automation to create a barcode. And then we can see that actually run and print out on the right. So we can actually see the barcode being produced on this red sticker. So now we're going to talk about how to manually use the AV box as well as some automation capabilities with the AV box. So I just want to go over a few things to keep in mind on both ends, and then I'll show an example of that live. So for the manual usage of the AV box, it'll be listed in a device. You'll see it in the device list. And what it'll have is it'll have this little label that shows you the relationship. So the camera device and DUT. And so then you can quickly decide which one are related to which. Once you use the device, you just need to click on one and both devices will appear in the UI, and you'll have the DUT on the left, the device under test, and then you'll have the camera device on the right. And the next part is recording sessions. So if you're familiar with the product, you know that there is a camera, a capture button. If you're not, it's a small button, you can click it. And in most use cases on phones, you can then select whether you want to record with or without network. And then after you make your selection, the button will change color, and then you'll know that the test is recording. Same principles apply here. However, the one thing to keep in mind if you're going to do some sort of DRM content is if you record on the device under test, we won't be able to see the DRM content. So the important thing is to make sure that you're either recording on both, or if you just care about viewing that DRM content, then you just record on the camera device. All that will also be true for automation with regards to which one you want to capture the session on. However, the other thing to keep in mind with this, since you're interacting with two devices, almost all the commands to actually make page changes or to load applications, you'll need to send those to the device under test because the camera device does not control that device at all. And additionally, you'll want to make sure, as I mentioned, to record the camera device for DRM content. And the last thing that I've noticed when I've been running automation on these type of devices is unlike in Android and iOS devices where you have XPath or selectors you can use. Typically, they're hard to come by in these sort of applications. There's some sort of overview layout, so you can't really easily find them. So the typical use case to encounter that is to use the remote commands instead. So like in Android keys, they have the D-pad left and right, so you can use that remote I was showing you earlier. And then in iOS, there'll be actual commands called right and down, and I'll show you an example of that in a code snippet. So let's go ahead and look at these. So this is a sandbox organization we have. And so we can see a wide variety of devices. And as we scroll, we can see at the very top, we have this AV box label that I was trying to describe earlier. So it's a blue label that just shows you the relationship between these two devices. Additionally, we have these little labels here to indicate a little more clearly which device you're actually testing and which device is the camera device. And now if we just click on this Fire TV, you'll see that both the device under test and the camera device appear on the screen. And then we can start interacting with the devices as you would. And as I said, we can just use this little mini remote and we can select what kind of application we want to open. So if we want to open up Netflix, we can just select that and it'll appear on the screen, and we can find the video that we want to serve. And then this is the section I was discussing recording. So if we want to go ahead and record, we could select to record this device, and then we can get the performance session that I was discussing in the slideware a little bit earlier, and same with this one as well. And if we had some sort of speaker we wanted to listen to during the manual test, we could hit this button to hear it. However, if you click that or not, if you record on the camera device, the audio will be saved in the performance session. The other thing I wanted to show as well is actual DRM content. And so what I have is I have two phones here. So we're going to test Netflix on this phone. So you interact with this just like you would a phone in hand. You can scroll to the application, and then you can play the application. And if my camera device wants to cooperate, then it will play the stream over there on the right. So we can see completely blank on the left, except for, all the DRM content is blank. We can actually see the stream here on the right. And so we can validate that the stream is playing or that's of good quality for the end user. Now, the last thing I want to show you live is an automation script. So what I'll do is I'll run this Fire TV. I'll run a YouTube script against it. And as that script kicks off, we should see a magnifying glass here on the Fire TV. We can go ahead and we can actually watch this test live. I started recording on this Fire TV, and then I will use an API call to go ahead and start recording on this device as well. And when that's happening, I'll show you the code snippet that I was discussing. Actually, I'll let this start first. So as we can see, it's opening YouTube, and then it'll do some navigation and start playing a video. And YouTube is not DRM protected. However, I have seen some issues with YouTube on the live stream on the device under test, but the camera device should still have a clear picture. But as you can see, it's not DRM protected, so we can see the stream on both sides. So now I'll show the commands I was discussing earlier. So typical Appium commands to actually grab the URL and the device. But then the one thing is we're starting capture here, and this is just on the camera device. And then we're making sure that after it's over that we stop it. And this is the kind of key codes I was discussing. So you can find this in the Android documentation of which key codes to use. And then down here, this is an iOS example. You can see you use the execute script function, and then you can go down, right, or select whatever sort of path is necessary for you on the device. So I'll go back to the slideware now. And so I want to show you a couple quick success stories on the AV Box platform. So here are some of the customers and some of the reduction or regression that they were running on to make sure that their product was better for their end user. And the last thing I want to do is I just want to reemphasize the summary of value of what this AV Box solution can give you. So, as we mentioned, there's a bunch of different types of devices that we can all now test in this AV Box scenario, from smart speakers to TVs themselves. So you can look at HeadSpin with the addition of the AV Box as sort of an omni-channel of device testing. You can test those hard to test use cases like the QR code scan or the check deposit or the Zebra devices. And then kind of similar to one, but like the non-natively support devices. So things that you can't really easily talk to through a machine like the Alexa or the Google Mini. And then lastly, that you can actually get the audio video quality testing. So you can actually validate how good your stream is on these devices for your applications. So now we'll turn it over to Q&A.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate it. That was a fantastic overview and demo. So we'll now take some questions from the audience. So let's see what we've got here. We'll start from the top and we will answer these one by one. So the first question is, how can someone automate image or video injection on the platform?
Yeah, so what you can do with that, let me minimize this slideware and then go back to this portion right here. So we have is we can go ahead with the auxiliary device, and we can use REST API calls to upload the image or video, and then when it's time for the test, to prepare it and then insert it into this auxiliary device. So then you can observe it on the device under test and validate that that stream is coming in, or you can interact with it however you need to.
Awesome. The second question that we have is, can an AV box or P box capture contents from smart TVs of different sizes?
Yeah, so our typical AV box solution is a little bit smaller, so it's harder to get the bigger TVs of bigger sizes. But what we have is let me go back up in this slide where we have this sort of rack right here, which will allow us to get to those larger scale TV models, so we can actually still test this as well.
Great. The next question that we have is, why is a QR code in the AV box better than a typical image injection through instrumentation?
So I would say that it's not necessarily better. It's just a different use case. Image injection is great for validating a lot of tests, but the thing that lacks is you have to instrument that application, which means you fundamentally change the application. And when you do that, you're not necessarily going to have the same code in production, which that's debatable of how much of an impact that has. However, you have to think about that sort of issue. However, with our AV box solution, you can have your productionalized application with no instrumentation and still validate that QR code use case.
Thank you, David. The next question that we have is, can we connect and control set-top boxes using infrared remote controls?
So we have had a lot of success using set-top boxes. I don't believe that the IR remote would be something that would be easily achievable, but there usually is another way to control it, either through Appium commands or maybe some sort of other model that we could use. The IR remote's just going to be hard without someone being able to physically click it, unless there's some use case in which you can click it remotely that I don't know about. But we have used set-top boxes that have IR remotes. We just usually use something besides the IR remote.
Excellent. The next question that we have is, how do you run automation against devices like Tizen TVs?
So with the availability of Appium 2.0 going live and the Tizen driver plugin, that has opened up a whole new world of able to control that device through automation. And so we'll just use that plugin on the platform, and then we can control that with Appium.
All right. The next question that we have here is, can we connect and control set-top boxes using Bluetooth?
Yeah, that should be very straightforward, considering there's a way to actually connect to those back and forth. And you can use that Bluetooth stream to be able to control it, since you'd actually be able to control that Bluetooth remote, I would assume remotely, if it's something that you could do on a phone or something of that nature. But yeah, Bluetooth should not be a problem.
Okay, and the last one that we have is, how do you ensure that CD is not introducing any additional AV anomalies in the original streams?
So that is something that is complicated, and it's something that we do see occasionally. However, normally the abnormalities that are produced are somewhat consistent, and so you can sort of plan around that in your progression of all of the of all your testing. However, with the TVs we have, it's usually pretty solid without much abnormalities, and same with Android. It's usually the iOS ones that we run into issues with. And we do have some control of the app that we have to set the quality of stream higher. So you can get a more straightforward stream than you typically would with other camera devices, just because of the way that our application works. However, there is going to be some abnormalities, but you have to sort of plan those out in your aggregation of data.
Thanks, David. And the last one that has come into this point is, does HeadSpin provide any automation framework for writing test scripts for OTT device testing?
Yeah, so we have Appium on our servers that these devices are running on. So you can actually go ahead and run Appium on these devices out of the box today.
Fantastic. Thanks, David, for going through all those questions and answering them with all that color. We'll give another minute here to see if any other questions come in. And if not, we'll look to wrap up the session. So we'll give folks a moment. If anything's come to mind, feel free to type in those questions in the Q&A tab there. Thanks for the feedback, Kartiki. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oops.
All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so. And we have one more question that came in right at the wire here. So, does HeadSpin provide any automation framework for writing test scripts for telecommunications devices? I think you've kind of touched upon that a little bit, David, but I don't know if you wanted to elaborate.
Yeah, and if you do want to clarify, when I'm thinking of mobile devices like phones, and yeah, we would support that with Appium as well. And as Nadav mentioned before, we can integrate with most other automation frameworks. Appium just happens to be our first in class, but that is provided in all the devices. They should have Appium with them on the server that it's running on.
Thank you, David. So it looks like we don't have any other questions. So wanted to thank everybody for making the time to join us today. We hope that you found this session helpful. Oh, we have one more. So can the AV or the P box be upstreamed to a private net?
Trying to think of what upstream would mean in this relationship. I would think the answer would be yes, but I'm trying to think of what you mean by upstream, and I could just be missing the.
Kartikya, do you want to spend a second and elaborate for us? We're happy to answer the question.
Now we can use a tunnel to, well, we could also go on premise with that too. If I'm thinking of this the correct way, where it's a net that's private, we could put the AV box on premise to that environment, or you could whitelist the IP of the device itself. If that's what your question is kind of relating to.
So he's saying, I mean, remotely connecting AV box through the enterprise network.
Yeah, then I would think that whitelisting could be an approach, or if you want to go on prem, that would be an approach, if I'm answering your question correctly.
And Kartikya, we're happy to schedule a session with you offline at another time to kind of walk through the intricacies of how we set up solutions for particular use cases. That's something that we do every day for a myriad of different clients. Thanks, Kartikya, appreciate it. So if there are no other questions, once again, thank you everybody for making the time today. Really appreciate you carving out time in your busy schedule. We hope you found the session informative and helpful. If there are questions that come to mind after the session, you can feel free to drop me an email at ngordon@headspin.io, and we can even look, as I mentioned to Kartikya, to schedule a deeper dive demo where we'll talk through the use cases and KPIs that matter to your particular organization and context. I should mention, we have another webinar coming up on September 26th. We'll be talking about performance KPI and capture analysis, and give you a chance to kind of take a look at how we synthesize insights from the data that our platform is able to gather across various use cases and measurements. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and goodbye, everybody. Thanks again.